Welcome to this week's edition of the Belau Report. I'm Jane Belau. Our guest this week, Shaun Palmer, member of the Rochester City Council and recently re-elected member of the City Council. We congratulate you on that.
Thank you, and thank you for having me on the show.
And you said the turnout was well?
It was 61% here in Rochester, or 65% here in Olmsted County.
Okay.
Yes.
And you have how many new council members?
We have one. Mr. Campion decided not to rerun, and Mr. Wall got elected. He's from the 3rd Ward out in northwest Rochester. So it would be interesting to have one more member, new member.
Well, that sounds good.
It does.
Okay. Now, your biggest issue that the city is dealing with right now?
Well, we're planning for next year, and sales tax extension is one of our biggest issues that we need to get through the state House and Senate. And that sales tax brings in about $12 to $13 million a year. And about 40% of that is paid for by people who don't live in Rochester. So it's a good funding source for us. Some of the ideas that we have that we're asking, there's 5 of them, and one of them is economic development. And that will help out with housing, and that will help out with our small communities around Rochester, I'm hoping. In the MSA areas that they call it. We have a group of small cities. And then streets, and how are we going to fix up our streets and ask for some more funding for that. And my concern is that we put in for traffic calming. Because a lot of neighborhoods, we have people running down the road quite a bit fast, and we can do some traffic calming. We just don't have enough money to go backwards and do some of those. And then flood control. You know, and flood control is the original sales tax ask. It spends about $1 million a year on maintaining that flood control project, and so we need to up that money again for flood control. And then a rec center, and that is we have not decided where it was going to be. We have made no promises to anybody what we're going to do. We're going to do a study, kind of see what is needed in the city of Rochester, and then go back and do that. After the state says yes, we agree with that. Right now, currently, we'd have to take it to our voters, and our voters would have to vote on it one at a time. Or what we'd like to do is have all 5 at one time, and you just vote for one, and it all passes or all fails. And so that's our sales tax ask. The other issue we have is our bonding, and that is a bonding year was this last year, and the state legislative people didn't do their job, didn't finish on time, and so we didn't get any bonding. And so we're asking for some bonding on that. One of the projects on that is the connection between southeast Rochester, the Willow Heights area, to go under 52, because 52 right now in 63 is kind of an area that you can't get back and forth without going over the highway, and we don't recommend that to anybody. And so that's one of the areas that we're looking for bonding.
All right. Now, both the sales tax and the bonding were passed in the Senate last year, right?
Correct. They had an agreement, and they just didn't vote on it. And Carla Nelson was our state senator, and she's a Republican, and she worked very, very hard for that for us. And now it's a Democratic-controlled Senate, and so we'll have to ask Liz Bolden to help us with Carla Nelson. And that's the nice thing about being nonpartisan. You know, we are a nonpartisan city council, and we can work with anybody and everybody, and we have to for our citizens.
Okay, I was reading about the sales tax discussion, and they talked about a city recreational facility.
Correct.
And what is that?
Well, right now we don't have a place for it, and it's about $65 million. And what we're going to do is go out to the community and find out, do we need soccer fields? Do we need baseball fields? Do we need hockey? Do we need, what do we need in the community? You know, Rochester's kind of unique. We have the rec center pool, and it's a 50-meter pool. Probably the best in the state, maybe right behind the University of Minnesota, but we do a lot of people come to Rochester because of that 50-meter pool. It's a fast pool, so it brings a lot of economic development into Rochester. The other one is our volleyball center. It's kind of unique. You know, it cost us about $10,000 a year in tax revenue to have that, but we bring a lot of different things in. So we're looking at a rec center. You know, does it have football fields, soccer fields? What does it have? We really don't have a plan yet. We're going to ask for that money, and then we're going to come up with our plan and see what the community needs.
What about the aquatic center that they're talking about for the Soldiers Field?
Well, that's a different issue, and it's kind of exciting because the last time the school referendum they had a new pool for Century, and that passed overwhelmingly, and they're just finishing that up. So we have a new pool being built out there. But the school pools are busy, and they're, people say, well, why don't we use the school pools? And because they are busy, and they are getting rid of their junior high pools, which is a shame. And so the Soldiers Field pool was remodeled about 25 years ago. It leaks. It's not well designed. The bathhouse is not where it needs to be. And so we have $9.6 million to renovate that pool. And I think we're going to scratch the earth, start all over with everything brand new. There won't be diving boards, but there'll be a 50-meter pool, a lazy river, and then just some play areas for the small young kids to play. The goal is not to go on the golf course. It's been a pretty big fight with the staff at the Park and Rec Department that we don't want it to go into the golf course, and the aquatics people say it doesn't have to. It's kind of a unique funding source for all the Soldiers Field Master Plan. We have $7 million for our park referendum that was passed about 3 years ago. Then we had $10 million from DMC, and then we've got $5 million more from the feds to help us out with that pool. And so the thought process is, do we really need to spend that much money there? We might take $5 million out of that referendum dollars and move it to other parks in Rochester. And I think that is pretty much what we're going to do. And then DMC is willing to fund about $10 million for the master plan for Soldiers Field. And I'm really proud of it, that the fact that they don't have a dog in the fight. They're not saying, this is what we want, this is what we want. They're saying, you come up with a plan, you listen to your community, and we'll fund it. And so I'm really happy that that's the idea that DMC has done. And it's not just talk. I mean, literally, they have not influenced anything at all. And I'm glad that happened the way that it did.
And DMC then is looking better?
It is, and it's always one of these things that when you're making your turkey, it always looks kind of harsh, and then when you get it all done and ready to go, it looks great. The Peace Plaza looks much better. It's more inviting for people. It's better to use. There's some distractors from it, but when we do the Discovery Walk, which we're in the middle of that's going to run all the way from 2nd Street Southwest all the way down to 6th Street Southwest, and it's going to be, I think it's $17 million, but almost 3/4 of the dollars are spent underground. It's new sewer, new water, new curb, new gutter, everything underground, and that's a busy area. It's got a lot of utilities underneath there, and as you know, Northwest Bell had their switch station down there, and so there's a lot of stuff underneath that ground that they're working on.
Wow. We don't know about that, the people.
Well, and the DMC is really good for us because the simple fact that it's bringing money into Rochester for infrastructure, stuff that we couldn't afford to do, and they're upsizing the sewer lines and everything. And Mayo Clinic is the largest employer in the area in the state of Minnesota. They have residents in 81 of the counties, of the 87 counties. Any other city in the world would love to have a Mayo Clinic, and we're lucky. And I think you're going to see some really good things come up this next year, some expansion in Rochester. That's really going to be exciting.
The DMC has faced a lot of criticism from the local people for not being able to drive and park downtown, and now the parking has opened up because so many of the employees are working from home. I mean, what do you do about that?
Well, it's kind of interesting. I love history, and I read the Post Bulletin. In 1950, one of the big things in the history was that there's no parking downtown. So it's always been no parking downtown, but we've worked on the parking ramps. About 15% of our traffic is down from before COVID, so we're missing about 15% of cars, and that's a survey that we had done. But things I think are looking up. I think that the Mayo Clinic has changed the way they do things, and I think a lot of people have pivoted. I think it's made change come faster than we thought it was going to, but I'm a person that likes change, and so I embrace that, and I think that you need to keep moving ahead.
How is the chateau coming?
That's kind of sitting out there, just kind of holding its own right now. We've got a group that's in there that's trying to market it. It's going to be better since you don't have a big construction site in front of it. I think we will end up somehow selling it and then having a developer develop it and get the tax credits. And then they'll bring it back and sell it back to the city. And right now, we don't get federal tax credits for that. So there's an arrangement, and that's been done in Red Wing. It was done in Duluth. It's been done in other cities in Minnesota that you kind of do that kind of a system, which will upgrade that chateau. But the chateau will always be here. We will make sure that it's in good shape, and it will always be here.
Good. And the trees downtown, have you heard from any of the small businesses that are concerned about the trees?
Most everybody downtown is happy with the trees, and at the very beginning last year, there was some dew that came off of them, and it was a little sticky, and they didn't like that. But these trees are unique because I don't know if everybody understands, but we have kind of a crow problem downtown Rochester. They like to come when it's warm downtown at night, and they don't like those trees because of the shape of their branches. And so it's going to be interesting to see if that sticks.
Okay. Otherwise, DMC is doing a good job?
You know, I think they've always done a good job. I'm not sure that they've done a great job of marketing themselves. In this year, when the candidates, they were very open, and they asked all the candidates to come down and explain to them the benefits and what DMC was. And I think if you understand it, it's better. Again, there's going to be a few people who will always not like it, but it's I think for overall, it's a benefit. You know, the sad part about everything is that you have small businesses downtown, people that, you know, that's their family livelihood, have had to leave because of rents have been high and or no traffic. COVID just raised havoc with everything. And we see that with community involvement. We see that with getting people together in neighborhoods and stuff. But our downtown, we have to help them out. We're a little harsh. It's hard for us to do that, you know, for the city of Rochester, but we've done most everything that we can. You know, we've had free parking for 2 hours. We did some grants. We've done a lot of what we could do. I mean, there's not much more we can do for the small businesses.
Okay. That's not encouraging, is it?
You got to be a realist, and you got to be. Do I think that things are going to be better soon? I think things will be better soon. I see an uptick in people downtown. You see an uptick in what's going on, but it's just the harsh reality of COVID and what it did to our small businesses.
Okay. All right. The budget. How are we doing on the budget?
The budget's doing pretty good. You know, we just all got our tax statements in the mail, and it was interesting. The second page of it is something that the state of Minnesota is making us do, and not making us, but it's good information to be out there. And one of the things on there is LGA, and it doesn't say LGA, but that we get tax rebate back from the state of Minnesota, and we're about $6 million. That was at one time $25 million. And so it's a formula that's old, it's broken. It doesn't work well for Rochester at all. It's based on homes built before 1940 and tax base, and so it's supposed to level out the playing field for everybody. And not everybody understands that Rochester has a unique community. We have 65 languages spoken in our community, and our poverty rate. You know, I'm proud of this. From the census, went down from 9% to 7%, which is a good thing. But we still have 7% poverty in Rochester, and that's not good. But our tax rate is levy went 6.2% is what we put in for the budget right now. In our December 5th meeting, we'll have a public hearing, and we'll have our last vote on it, and we'll certify our taxes for next year.
How about the homeless? And are we overbuilding affordable housing, or are we keeping up with the need?
Well, that's an interesting question, and I'll tackle the homeless first. And we have a lot of nonprofits. We have the Dorothy Day Center that's helping out with our homeless. We have the Salvation Army. We have the Landings. We have church groups that help out with our homeless. Homeless is basically a county job, but it affects Rochester. And we've been trying to work well with Olmsted County in providing services for our homeless. We have about, I'll use the word 20 homeless people who are just not ready for housing. We have housing available for them, but because of mental illness or some other issues, they just aren't trustworthy of going into a homeless shelter. Olmsted County wants it to be few and in between, and they want it to be brief. They don't want you to be homeless for a long period of time and move on. Now, housing is a different issue, and it's a huge issue for Rochester, and we're not doing a very good job of that. We have about 150 single-family dwellings this year have been built. Our 10-year average used to be 500 homes, and the lowest I've ever seen it was 181 houses. So we're at 150 so far this year. Back in 1979, we had 21% interest rates, and we built 181 houses. We had an energy crisis. We still built 181 houses. You know, and then '84, IBM made their announcement that they were going to lay some people off and redo their businesses. And we still had 100 and some houses. And then, you know, the Great Recession in 2008, we still were above 180 houses. And so that's a huge concern to me. Why are we at 150 houses? Why are we so far down on single-family dwellings? And that's what people want. You know, we need a good mixture. We have some people who are here in Rochester for 2 or 3 years. They're not going to buy a home. But most people, that's their biggest investment. That's where they gain their most equity in their life. And we're not doing that. And there's got to be a reason. We had the Maxfield study done. We've done it twice now with the county. And it had a difference in us price-wise with the Twin Cities was 41% difference. So same house, 41% difference from the 7-county metro area. We're now at 12% difference. In what changed? Why is that happening? And my conclusion is that we changed the way we charge for sewer and trunk lines. And we're strangling growth, and we can't do that, and we need to expand. And I think the city council has to, you know, wake up and look at that, because those are big issues, and there's a reason, and I don't think we're attacking it. It's about $20,000 less to build in Casson than it is here. And if you talk about sustainability, having somebody drive into Rochester with their car to come into the Mayo Clinic to work, that's just not sustainable for us. You know, living in Rochester where we can provide sewer, we can provide bus, we can have that talent stay in Rochester is important to me. And so I'm hoping that my fellow council members will see that as a concern and, you know, make the goal of 1,000 houses being built every year for the next 10 years and get our housing stock back to where it should be.
How does that happen? How to get it going?
How does it happen? You have to relook at how we do things. And we have some good people in Rochester. One of the things you could do is that you could bond for the sewer and the road construction for these new homes and have them pay that bond for over 15 years and stretch that out instead of having to pay for it right away. Little things make a difference. You know, we used to require copper piping coming into the house. You know, the state of Minnesota said we can't do that. Everybody else around us was using plastic pipe. You know, that's $800. You know, that's a lot of money, but 800 times 5 is 4,000, and there's a multiplier. So when you have a lot, and you buy a lot, let's say for $100,000, your home needs to cost $500,000. That's just a kind of rule from the mortgage companies. So everything we add, we multiply it by 5. And so when we require trees at the boulevard, that costs money. When we require them to pay the sewer up front, that costs money. And I think Rochester has to decide, is this an investment or is this an expense? And to me, it's an investment. Mayo Clinic will tell you the last 15 years, their number one problem has been getting enough talent, enough staff to work. And how do we do that? We can't do it all in Rochester. I mean, we have great neighborhood communities behind us, you know, around us, surrounding us. We have a lot of people who come into Rochester every single day to work at Mayo, and that's important.
All right, transportation.
Yep.
The new transportation buses, are they electric vehicles or are they carbon fueled? Tell us about the transportation program.
Well, we have 2 electric buses that we got a federal grant, and so we bought 2 electric buses. I think one of them is still not working. There's hit and miss on electric buses. I'm not a fan of electric buses. Duluth had them and they didn't work very well. St. Paul had them, they didn't work very well. Ours are going to be on limited routes, and they're going to be hard to maintain. And I don't think that, it sounds like a good idea, but I'm not particularly sure it's going to work out in this weather. You know, buses to me is very important, because if I can get rid of a car, I can save $9,000. But our regular bus lines, it was too cold and our buses didn't work. And then you turn around, we had too much snow, and then it was too windy. And so you know, if I'm a Mayo Clinic employee and I'm at the entry level and I'm depending on that bus to come and go, I have to have that bus come and go. And I think we need to work on our dependability. It's always a reminder to people that we don't pay any property taxes for our buses, and they're all paid for by the state, and the federal government gives you grants, and so it doesn't cost you as a taxpayer to have a bus.
Except that if they don't work, right?
Well, one of the biggest fears is electric fires. And, you know, an electric vehicle, if it starts on fire, it's about, they say, 8,000 gallons of water to put it out. Right now, I've just read a case about a bus that fire department had to put out. They literally hooked up a tow truck and pulled it out of the building and just let it burn down. It's a concern of our fire department. It's a concern for public safety of these buses that would burn down. It doesn't happen a lot, no. But can you imagine having an electric bus in your garage and taking out all the rest of your buses? So again, I'm not a fan of electric buses, but there are some people who are.
Well, you aren't a fan of a lot of things, but you've been very successful. And what I would say is just keep doing what you're doing. Let's talk about what you would change if you could change something in the city.
You know, my number one goal has been and will continue to be is how do you get average people involved in government? How do you get them to come to committee meetings? How do you get them to say, hey, this is what I want? You know, an example is Elton Hills Drive. They proposed to take it down to 2 lanes. And we had an open house. We had 180 people show up and express their concerns. And that is good government. That's when you can listen to people. A lot of times we get 5 or 6 highly vocal people who you think represent a lot of people. They don't. 180 people, yeah, that's a much better number. And so getting more people involved in government is a goal. You know, and some of it is, you know, government belongs to those people who show up. But the flip side is I can't have a meeting at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and expect, you know, average people who are working to come in. And so we've worked on doing better, but we can do better. And so that's one of the things for me is to how do we get better public involvement. The housing issue to me, the single family dwelling is a huge issue, and that's something that we really need to work on. So those are kind of my bigger issues for the next couple of years.
Okay, are the boards, like the library board and the music board and what's the third one?
Well, we have RPU board, park board, and yep.
And does that fall within your get more average people involved?
It does, and the mayor has worked on that. And you know, it's kind of interesting, we were talking before, and you were on the Charter Commission, and the charter is what runs, it's a rule book for Rochester. It tells us how we do things. Today I'm going to go talk and see if we can't get it changed a little bit. And so we have 3 charter boards. RPU is one of them, library board, and then the Park and Rec Department is a charter board. And their charter says that they hire and fire, supervise their department head, and the city administrator has nothing really to do with that. They can work together and do that, but we're going to try to change that a little bit. And then we have non-charter boards, and that is just advisory boards, and we have an energy commission, we have a music board, we have other boards. And so that's one way for people to get involved. And for me, when I first got involved in government in Rochester was in '91. I was on the Environmental Commission for Olmsted County and spent 5 years doing that in committees and listening to budgets and stuff. And so I learned a lot about, you know, the townships and the county and how do you work with budgets. And the landfill, we were at the bottom, before they opened up the Colmer landfill, we were at the bottom of this cell that you looked up and said, well, this is going to be full of garbage, and how do we do that? And, you know, and so that, you know, how do we work with the county and the city and our neighbors in the townships? And so, you know, getting involved in committees is something that we can do.
So where is your proposal for the boards now?
Well, today at 3 o'clock, and this is being taped on Tuesday, I'm going to go to the Charter Commission. I'm going to make 3 recommendations. One of them that they stay, the Park Board and the Library Board stay as charter boards. That's the number one thing. And number 2, to have the department heads report to the city administrator instead of to the Park Board and the Library Board. And that's I think that's a good debate, and I think that we should have that work. And then the second part of my, or third part of my ask is that the wards, council people then appoint or recommend to the city council their person that they like to be on the library board and the park board. And then when I'm elected, then I would pick my person by March and say, this is the person I want, and they would serve as long as I serve. Or in 4 years, I could change that person and move that along. The advantage to that is that you get a better responsive, you get to work with your library board member, you get to work with your park board member, better for the community so they can be more involved. But then the council president would get 1 vote, and then the mayor would get, not 1 vote, but 1 person, and then the mayor would get 2 people she could appoint. So out of 9, 3 would be citywide, which I think is a good mix. And so we'll see where that goes. So if the charter board enjoys it or likes our idea, they'll recommend it to the city council. The city council will look at it, and we need 7 votes. If we get 7 votes, it then changes the charter. If we get 6 and only 6, then it goes back to the charter commission. The charter commission say, well, let's do a referendum. We think this is important. We'll ask the voters. And so the next time we have a citywide election, that would come up with that.
Okay, we're down to our last 5 minutes, and we haven't talked about the Uniform Building Code, and what is the status of that?
Well, it's a UDC, Unified Development Code, and we okayed that back, I believe, in July, and they're working very hard of getting that put together. In January 1st, it will be up and running, and it will change a lot of our zoning ordinances. It will change how we do things. It should make it easier for somebody to come into Rochester and say, I'd like to build this project, and these are the rules. It takes away some of the public hearings, which is a good thing because it takes away the uncertainty. And so when a developer comes into a city, they go, I'm not particularly sure, what my risks are. When you read the United Development Code, it literally tells you what you can and can't do. And staff can make a lot of, they take what the city council has said and they can then implement that without having to do a public hearing. One of the big things that I pushed hard for this is to have our square foot on our lots go down to 3,000 square feet, have our setbacks taken down. So we have less minimum. Right now it's 6,000 square feet. So if a developer wants to come in and build 3,000 square feet lots, they could. They don't have to, but they could. I think people will be happy with it. Like everything, it's a change. It'll take a little bit of getting used to.
All right. What would you like help on from the viewers?
Well, and they can always reach out to me and say, hey, this is what I like or I don't like. And you can always get a hold of me at palmerward5.org. That's my website, or they can just send it to me at palmerward5@gmail.com. And so, if they have suggestions, but get involved with government. Get involved and read the paper or listen to Carol C. Radio or watch your show and say, hey, these are important things, and get involved with government. It does belong to those who show up, and we do listen. And if you have a question, I get questions all the time, and I should be able to answer them. If I can't, I'll send them to our staff and have them answer that. So those are good things. The only other thing we just got done, I'll just add, we just redid our sidewalk ordinance, and that's going to change, and we're going to add about $45 to a house per year for your sidewalks, instead of you getting a bill for maybe $800 on the average. And kind of surprises people. Some are as high as $6,000. You'll just pay it into the pot every year, and we'll maintain your sidewalk. So.
Okay. Thank you, Shaun Palmer from the Rochester City Council, District 5. And we wish you luck and thank our viewers for your interest in city issues, state issues, national issues. We'll be with you again next week, same time, same channel. In the meantime, have a very good week and a very good night.